Hello and welcome back to the Comic Literate Podcast, the podcast that does deep dives into the best of comic books, graphic novels, mangas, and sometimes not the best or the worst or the middle in betweens. We're still workshopping that opening. With me, I'm your host, the soon to be known as Comic Standard. With me, as always, is my Whovian co-host, Jamie.
I'm not a fucking Whovian.
Well,
I'm not a Whovian.
That's how we get to the subject. Is first question: do you count yourself a Whovian? And
No.
now the answer is no, which is fair enough.
Do you?
I would say I used to be, by the strictest definition of the word. I
Yeah.
definitely used to follow, and and then we're gonna get into it, but that was a quick way to get us close to the subject.
I remember when I was a kid, there was a friend whose house I stayed at a lot, and I would often be there on Saturday evenings, and his mum made bomb-ass fresh pizza. He'll know who he is. His mum made banging fresh pizzas, and we would sit and eat pizza, and they would always put Doctor Who on. This was like Eccleston era Doctor Who. So I consumed a lot of that, and I've always thought that David Tennant is a god among men.
Yes, one of the best actors.
Incredible actor, wonderful human being. And so I've seen a bit of the because there was a crossover with Billy Piper, wasn't there? There was a bit where Eccleston's Doctor had left, but Billy Piper was still hanging about, and then David Tennant spent some time with her as a companion.
I think she did a whole season with Tennant. So
Did
I think
she do
she
a whole D season with him?
2 seasons, one with Eccleston, one with Tennant. But then after she hadn't been in it for a while, she then came back for oh my god, Rose is back, what's going on? And that kind of thing.
Because I think David Tennant and Billy Piper's chemistry on screen was banging. They were a really good pairing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it was interesting going off the switch from Eccleston to transfer that chemistry, which I think they did quite successfully.
Yeah, because again, her and Eccleston were great on screen together, weren't they?
Exactly.
He was a good Doctor.
Eccleston is the best Doctor in my opinion. I know Tennant is the favorite, and I absolutely see why. I'm not gonna go against anyone who says Tennant's their favorite.
Choice here. I like Matt Smith.
Matt Smith was good as well. What I liked about Eccleston was he brought a lot more of the undercurrent, raw, anger and violence that was simmering under because what the Doctor's been through, especially by this point, was justifiably enough to be traumatized and angry about. And he had that simmering just under the surface while having a goofy smile on the top, which I think is quintessential Doctor, really.
Yeah, I mean, he was because bear in mind, for anybody who doesn't know anything about Doctor Who is a children's TV show from the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, originally, yeah.
And then they brought it back in the 2000s. It had gone away for a long time, hadn't it? And so it was really, really keenly awaited by an adult audience who remembered being terrified by Doctor Who as children. And I think Eccleston was perfect for that purpose. A really great, very gruff, but also quite charming northern actor.
Yeah.
And I think the Doctor historically had always been southern, hadn't he? He'd always had a BBC accent.
That sounds true. I haven't checked it, so I don't know, but it sounds correct.
Yeah, I think they'd all, at least even if some of the actors who'd played him had been northern, they'd all been doing the BBC thing of using received pronunciation, right?
Which in the 60s and 70s was kind of mandate for being on the BBC, wasn't it?
Yeah. If you're on the Beeb, you're well spoken.
Yeah.
And then Christopher Eccleston, obviously incredibly articulate, but northern. And for our American listeners, that's a big deal in the UK. There is a divide between the north and the south.
And
I saw a map the other day, Ryan. I saw a map the other day that made me so happy. It was the north-south divide as represented by the density of Waitrose. And obviously in the south, particularly in the south around London, you couldn't see the map for all the pins where all the Waitrose were. And then there's 5 in the north and 1 in Scotland. And I really wanted to then also put all the Gregs on a map because you'd see the same thing happen in reverse.
I think that used to be the case, but I don't think that's anymore. I mean, I don't know what the real actual density in the north of Greg's is. The stereotype, it's a lot.
Oh my God, Ryan. When I lived in Leeds, you would buy a Greggs sausage roll, walk in any direction, and before you would finish that Greggs sausage roll, there was another Greggs. Well, you can't imagine how dense, the north is lousy with them.
But we have also increased volume in Greg's.
We have, yeah.
I don't think we've matched the North yet, but it's definitely gone up.
The dizzying pastry heights of the north of England.
And at one point, Norwich had 2 Greg's facing opposite each other. For a
did.
short time, we did. So
yeah, I mean, they were moving one into the other.
we were technically the most northern southern city.
I mean, we kind of are the most northern southern
A bit
city.
geographically, yeah. But in that moment, culturally, we were as well.
This has become very parochial.
Yes. And for anyone who didn't guess, if anyone's just somehow tuned in all of a sudden, we are talking about Doctor Who this week.
I know we are. Do you know what the worst thing is? I signed off on this.
I mean, I did say, I asked you. It wasn't like hey, we should do this because it's the 60th anniversary. I was like, do you want to do Doctor Who? And you were like, yeah, I think I might have something to say.
And then I read the comic and was like, I have nothing to say.
Now, see, what's interesting is I actually rather enjoyed the comic.
Did you?
I did. And I mean, I've got my points to make about it, and we're going to get into it. But first up top is the 60th anniversary of Doctor Who. They're doing a big special. David Tennant's back, big old thing. And you said earlier about seeing it as a bit as a kid. Is that your extent with the franchise?
That, and I listened to quite a lot of Chameleon Circuit as a teenager. Scandal noted. You know who Chameleon Circuit were? They were a band of YouTubers, not like a roving band of YouTubers, a band of musicians on YouTube.
Right.
Who made a band called Chameleon Circuit where they exclusively sang songs about Doctor Who.
So you gained knowledge of the lore from this band.
Yeah, absolutely. But we can't. If anybody is familiar with Chameleon Circuit, they will know that it had Alex Day in it. Scandal noted. I don't know if you know who Alex Day is.
I do not. Do we want to bring it up on the podcast or not?
I mean, no. Like, it's not important, but
if you want to know, you can find out. You can Google.
But it also had Charlie McDonnell in it.
Who's that?
Charlie is so cool. Like, you'll remember her. She was a really, really popular British YouTuber in the late noughties.
I mean, maybe. No guarantees. Like, no guarantees that I would recognize her.
Oh, yeah, no, maybe not. So she played a ukulele, made funny videos on YouTube.
Okay.
But she was kind of one of the progenitors of, like... She was one of the first to hit, like, 1 million subs. She was friends with the Vlog Brothers. She was just a prominent vlogger back in the day, but she was in Chameleon Circuit as well.
Fair enough. Well, me personally, I did jump on board in the 2005 Eccleston revival and was a bit avid of it then. I do think that was good Doctor Who back then, although I had never seen any of it from beforehand, so I can't compare to that. I'm definitely a new Who fan, I think is the phrase, whereas old Who. Yeah, new Whovian versus old.
Whovian.
Yeah. I don't know, do we have that for Star Wars? Like the obviously you got like the sequel fans versus the prequel fans versus the original trilogy fans.
I mean, I think what's wild is that Gen Z have now kind of come of age enough that we're listening to their opinions enough, and they're all saying prequels were good, we liked them.
Yeah, but yeah, like I enjoyed the prequels when I saw them as a kid as well. But you have to acknowledge, like, just because you enjoyed it as a kid, there's a lot of things I enjoyed as a kid that I'm fully willing to say now they're objectively not that good.
Eating breakfast.
But eating breakfast.
Something that you enjoyed as a child that you no longer do now.
I have occasional breakfast. I mean, it's not the best meal you could be having per day, you know?
Yeah, no, you're a fairly big no breakfast advocate, I would say. I think that's like one of your core personality facets.
But also put it this way, breakfast is awesome to have in the moment. Like, there's nothing better than waking up going, oh, immediate food.
Yeah,
but your body's like, what is this immediate food bollocks? Like, we had thousands of years where breakfast was not a thing.
I've not even pooped yet. Why are you giving me more food?
Unless you woke up next to like a bush of berries or something. Like, there was no breakfast. unless an animal had mysteriously died next to you while you slept and you woke up and you were like, well, I guess this is breakfast now.
I like the fact that I said you weren't that into breakfast anymore, and you were like, oh, I'm into breakfast, and then instantly started talking about all the reasons you think breakfast is balls.
Because there's some people who naturally just don't eat breakfast.
Yeah.
Like, I actually have to make it, I don't know why we're on this now from Doctor Who, but I made the choice of being like, I guess I'll eliminate breakfast and see how I get on with that, and it worked well for me. But some people just like forget. Some people forget meals. I do not know. Considering I've like don't have one of the three main ones, I don't know how anyone could forget a meal.
When you say some people forget meals, you're talking about me, aren't you?
I wasn't going to call you out because I'm a nice co-host.
Yeah, I forget to eat, but I think that's because I'm neurodivergent, mate. I think that's because I'm a bit special.
Your stomach's still sending like the same signals to your head.
Yeah, but not really. No, like I just forget to eat sometimes, man.
That's alien to me because I'm always thinking about, I know always, unless I'm in some insane scenario, I know exactly what I'm going to eat next, you know? And even then, if it's like you're going to a restaurant in the evening or something, even that's like, I know where I'm going to eat. I know roughly what I'm going to have, even if I haven't picked out something from the menu. I'm not one of those people who looks at a menu online before you go because I'm just like, why ruin the surprise for yourself? Like, sit down, pick up the menu.
I thought you would be one of those people. I'm one of those people.
Nah, sit down. Once you sit down, you're taking in the atmosphere of the restaurant, and everything. You pick up the menu, go, ooh, look at that. What have they got here? You know?
So we are in the process of booking our work Christmas meal because that's a thing that happens. Mm-hmm. Not that I'm thrilled about the whole concept of, anyway. And me and a colleague have been messaging about the menu in a place that we're going to eat in 3 weeks.
Well, that's different because they give you the menu because you have to pre-order because you're a big booking. So that's different. Like I get like if you've got it, then you might as well have a look at it and discuss it or whatever. But I mean like when you're just going like with a family or friends or something and someone's like, ooh, I've just looked at the menu and they've got, and I'm like, why are you like, just leave it. Like,
how do I know what I'm going to be hungry for?
Just savor the experience for when you get there, It's like the opposite, not the opposite. It's a similar vein of like going to a landmark and everyone's just got their phones in front of them taking pictures. Like,
oh God, yeah.
You could Google a picture of the Golden Gate Bridge. You don't need this picture on your phone.
Do you know, some of my friends who are a bit younger than me, like I've got some friends that are in that kind of, they're like, I'm most definitely a young millennial, they're kind of zillennials. They're like right on the cusp, like born in the like mid to late 90s. And I got really annoyed at a bunch of people with their phones out at a concert the other day. And my mate just looked at me and went, you're such an old man. Like, you shouldn't be bothered by that. And I was like, but it's annoying for the same reason. I'm like, I could Google bootleg footage of the fucking Libertines from anywhere.
Exactly.
I get to see the Libertines maybe but once in my short lifetime, and I don't want to do that through the phone screen of the person in front of me.
And the argument other people make, they're like, yeah, but, later on in life, you forget the experience, but you have the memento of whatever the video you've taken or whatever. And then, fair enough. Photos of you with people you're hanging out with, like friends. You take a group shot with your friends. You go, you're 70, 80 years old. And you go, I remember then, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But people who are like, what if you forget seeing bloody the pyramids or whatever? It's like, if I don't remember and you show me a photo that I didn't take, then I must just assume, oh, I guess that's mine. I guess I was there and I took that then.
Yeah.
Because you have nothing to compare. Like having a picture of something or like something you saw is not going to help when you don't have the memory of the original thing.
And also, like, I walked the Brooklyn Bridge, right? And that's actually quite a breathtaking experience. Like, it was the first time I'd ever seen Manhattan, and I saw it from the Brooklyn Bridge for the first time ever as you kind of start to descend upon it and you see the buildings rise, and it's a really cool experience. No photograph that I would be able to take as a novice photographer would compare to that experience or even really bring me back to that experience. Like when you're witnessing something really special, like something truly objectively special from the Anthropocene, the pyramids are a great example, like a marvel of human engineering. I don't think your little like 8x10 that you took on a camera phone in 2023, 70 years later, is really going to serve the purpose anyway, is it?
Totally agree. And I think that should come to an end of our old man yells at cloud segment.
Because that's essentially what this has been.
And probably is going to be reoccurring to a certain degree. But I feel like we should name it that just for a little bit of self-awareness.
Absolutely, yeah. We're just two bitter old men.
Yes. Not that old, but old enough to complain.
I'm old enough for a lot of things, Ryan.
Yes. You're only as young as you feel or you're old as your knees or whatever the saying is. And speaking of old, Doctor Who is a pretty old TV show, as you just said.
Yeah,
60s,
it is,
70s.
Isn't it? Yeah, so what, 60 years old would put it firmly in the 1960s.
And I was thinking about this, because like earlier I just used the word franchise. That feels like a weird word to use for this.
Yeah.
Franchise to me feels like, I don't know if the state of the ownership really makes that much of a difference, but it doesn't feel like the BBC have franchise Doctor Who. It feels like they've kept it going. And there have been spin-offs and some other stuff like that.
Torchwood was a spin-off, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it does all the same stuff a franchise does. It merchandises and it, trademarks and gets and it releases tie-in comic books and things like that for extra money. But it doesn't. I don't know. Am I weird for thinking like it doesn't feel like a proper franchise? It feels a bit like a British institution. Like,
I'm right there with you, and I think it is. It's very Britishness that does that to it because it's a BBC production. And again, for our American listeners who maybe aren't Anglophiles, because there are a lot of American Anglophiles, aren't there?
I feel like BBC News is where they hear it most often.
Yeah, the BBC is an institution in the UK. And it's something that like a lot of people maybe of a slightly older generation would watch something purely because it was made by the B, because they think, well, the BBC made it, so it must be good.
And even though it's technically government funded, I mean, it's funded by the TV license, technically.
Yeah.
But that's obviously paid. The government arranged that.
Yeah.
Even though it's government funded, it still has an air of impartiality politically. And the only reason I say that is because I constantly see people on both the left and the right claiming it's not impartial. So I feel like if you're actually aiming for real impartiality, that's probably the best
everyone's
sign
upset.
of it. Exactly, yeah. No one's going to be like, we all respect you because you don't take a side. Like,
yeah, I agree.
Actual practical impartiality, real neutralness. Both sides going, you bastard, you fucked us over. No, they fucked us over. So
yes, I agree with you. And it is an institution, and they've made some cool shit. Right? Like the Beeb have made some really cool shit up and down the years.
They've made some good stuff, but for the amount of stuff they make, speaking as a television fan, a British television fan, they don't make nearly enough stuff to justify the grandiose, the self-reverence that they have. I think they ride the coattails of the few great things they make. When they made Sherlock, they were riding on that for ages after. So here's another Sherlock-like thing, and none of them was good, and Sherlock itself fell off a cliff towards the end in quality.
It did, yeah.
But Doctor Who is one that's quality is an interesting one there, because it's, even though it's not a franchise or anything, and it's not got film directors, it's had showrunners, and that apparently has marked some points in quality.
Well, I think one of the things that any Whovian will say is part of the joy of Doctor Who is that it reaches really great heights, and some of it's really sublime, and then it also hits the absolute troughs of being ridiculous. And even a Whovian would say Doctor Who isn't always good, but that's part of its charm.
Well, there's a bit of a trend. I know exactly what you mean in terms of per episode. You can pick those points out per episode, and that's all part of the Doctor Who culture, in a way, and the whole style. Absolutely. The trend in terms of quality does seem to line up from kind of common consensus, and obviously everyone's gonna have different opinions about this. But apparently, there's two showrunners who have worked on it. So you've got, for the first couple of seasons, you had Russell T Davies, who has just come back for this 60th anniversary and is taking it over again. He did obviously your Eccleston and your Tennant, which are revered as some of the best Doctor Who. And then you've got this other guy, Stephen Moffat, who took over for then the Matt Smith era, going into Capaldi and Jodie Whittaker.
Yeah.
And apparently, apparently Moffat is seen as not as good a showrunner as Russell T Davies. I want to clarify, just in case, I did not watch barely. I watched the Matt Smith. I did feel like the Matt Smith was going a bit all over the place towards the end. The story was kind of going a bit everywhere. And then I watched the beginning of the Capaldi era, and I quit that because in the first episode is in the medieval ages, and he comes riding out on a tank playing an electric guitar. And I was like, one, that's such a ham-fisted attempt to be cool, to appear cool, that did not seem self-aware at all. It wasn't ironic or done for a joke.
Yeah.
It just genuinely seemed like they were trying to make him seem cool. And what's bad as well is some of the best part of the David Tennant era, there was a part where there was a few specials where he didn't have a companion.
Yeah.
And he was actually in this kind of this trial and tribulation of questioning why he can't change the things in time that he can't.
Yeah.
And there was this episode where he ends up accidentally on Mars, and he meets the first Mars astronauts.
Yeah.
And one of them, he basically says he knows they all die. So this is from a few years ago, so spoilers, but he knows they're all going to die. So he's like, and he gets to know them. And he starts the episode being like, yeah, I can't interfere. Like, I know what's going to happen to you. I can't do anything. And by the end, he's like, you know what? Bollocks this. Like, he's just lost a companion. So he's in like a raw area. So he's like, you know what? Bollocks this. I'm going to save you. Like, who cares? I'm getting my TARDIS. We're getting out of here. And the woman who finds out, she's like, you told me that I have to die here so that my daughter will be inspired to become an astronaut, and then she achieves more than I did. And that's why it's such a pivotal point where they have to die.
Yeah.
And he's like, you know what? Fuck that. Like, I'm deciding now. Get in the TARDIS. I'm taking you home. And he takes her home, and then he takes her home. And if I'm right remembering, she basically goes home and kills herself. And to try and, because she knows that's how it has to happen.
Right.
And
that's dark.
I know,
it?
exactly. And he basically, that Tennant Doctor Who is like, spirals out of control, and that leads to him having to regenerate, where he like that's builds to that point.
I mean, I think one of the like features of both Tennant and Matt Smith's Doctors are that they are both a bit more unhinged. Like Christopher Eccleston's very grounded in the role, isn't he?
Yeah, but he felt like he had that unhingedness just under the surface. That's what I told her. Like, he had access to it and he could pull it out. Like the last episode, the Eccleston one, he basically says like the Daleks have come back.
Yeah,
and he's like, you know what? I'm going to kill all of us. Like all you Daleks and me, I'm going to kill us all. And the Daleks like, why would you risk that? And he's like, but I can't remember what he said at the time, but it basically came across to me in my fall-on memory as, I'm fucking crazy, all right? Like, I'm going to kill us all.
I'm a bit tapped and this is happening,
exactly. And it was that, but he said it in a Doctor Who way. But what I remember, I don't remember the words, but I remember the feeling that he elicited with his performance. But like I said, Tennant having this thing with protecting the timeline and going against it, and that being such a big point, and then you had the entire Matt Smith run, and then you had the Capaldi one where he's bring back tanks and electric guitars to medieval time.
Yeah.
And at no point did they address that in the Matt Smith one. I was like, fair enough. You don't need to, you've done that story. You don't need to touch it again. Like, it'd be cool if you did, but you don't need to. But to then go the opposite direction, completely unexplained with the Capaldi one, I was like, I'm done. Like, I give up now. And apparently, again, the quality, I just kept hearing it wasn't great. The Capaldi one, the writing, I should say. The acting has always been, the Doctor's always been good.
Peter Capaldi, man, he's a great fucking actor.
Exactly. And
I heard he was really good in
Thick of It.
Well, he was really good in The Thick of It. I loved him in The Thick of It. I've heard he was good in the Game of Thrones spin-off.
He's not in that?
Is he not?
No.
Is Peter Capaldi not in the Game of Thrones spin-off?
No. House of the Dragon. No. You're thinking of Matt Smith, aren't you?
He's in it too.
Matt Smith is in it, yeah.
1 minute. I could have sworn he played the Mad King. But that wouldn't make any sense, would it?
No, I can't remember his name, but he's great British actor. He was one of the Andys in Hot Fuzz. Patrick something?
Yeah, okay.
No, one of the Andys, yeah.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. He's not in House of the Dragon at all.
I thought you might be thinking of, is it Rhys Ifans?
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
A lot of British people in that show. But Capaldi's, he's done a lot of good stuff. And apparently Whittaker was really good in the role as well. But all I kept hearing from the outside was the writing and the stories are not great. So...
Yeah, how do you feel about the new bloke?
New Doctor is Ncuti Gatwa, who I absolutely had to Google the name of to get the pronunciation correctly, to the point where I Googled him saying it himself. So it's like, I am getting this right.
That's respectful, man.
Exactly.
That's cool. I rate it.
And luckily he's famous enough. It's not like with the comic book artists where like, there's no interviews with this letterer, so who knows. But he, a big fan of his before he got announced from the TV show Sex Education.
Which he is phenomenal in as Eric. Yeah, he's such a great performance.
One thing I've had, and this is something I've not told anyone, because it's just never needed to, never came up. I'll sometimes fantasize like, what if I remade this thing that I was a fan of, but like a modern version, right?
Do you do that too?
Yeah, well, maybe it's more common then.
That's really fun.
One thing I was thinking of was a modern adaptation of Red Dwarf. And I thought him and the guy who plays Otis would be a good Lister and Rimmer.
Yeah, because Ncuti would be the perfect Rimmer.
No, Ncuti would be Lister.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I always get them mixed up. Yeah. No, he would be really great at that.
Otis would be a great uptight Rimmer, but like they're such good friends. Like they have great friend chemistry in Sex Education. So imagine them being like enemies who become friends, like in Red Dwarf. I thought would have been great. But now he's going to be too famous for that.
Oh, and then who would you have as Cat?
I don't know enough young actors. That's the thing. It's like I saw Sex Education. I was like, this is the only thing I've seen like young actors in like commonly. So I've just found the first two that fit. So
yeah, that whole cast is fucking great.
yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, again, like we were saying before, Gillian Anderson.
Gillian Anderson, man, is a hot therapist mum.
So Shuey looks like he's going to be good, but the main thing as well is the return of Russell T Davies.
Yeah.
And again, Stephen Moffat, apparently his show running period was not great for writing, but I will caveat that by saying he did write some of the most well-received episodes during the Russell T Davies earlier days.
And he wrote a bunch of Sherlock, didn't he?
Yeah, but again, that Sherlock was great in the beginning and fell off at the end, so that's not great.
But I think he wrote the start of Sherlock. Like, I think he was the original showrunner.
He also wrote the end. Him and he was from League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Mark Gatiss.
Right,
They both did Sherlock, yeah. And I think Gatiss has done a bit in Doctor Who as well. But yeah, so Russell T Davies returning as showrunner, that's obviously got people hyped for it.
Yeah.
I watched the 60th anniversary, and that was a very return to form with Tennant and Catherine Tate.
Yeah.
Catherine
Tate was a great companion, wasn't she?
She was very much a, what the bloody hell is that kind of thing, which was missing from the companions, I think.
Very fun and working class and British. Like,
yeah, exactly, yeah. And it was an interesting plot. It was kind of a by the numbers, but it was vague enough that they kind of put some new spin on where they left off with the character, with Catherine and Tennant, and they still haven't explained why Jodie Whittaker regenerated into Tennant again, because that in itself is quite odd, and I don't think has ever happened before. So, interesting to see where they go from there. They had a fun villain type who is part of the story and is revealed, so I won't get into that at all if anyone hasn't seen it. But it's worth checking out if you have any passing interest in Who. It felt like, for me, and what I've seen, it felt like quintessential Doctor Who again.
So one of the things that confuses me about Doctor Who is when you get that moment where two of the Doctors meet, and they're both surprised by each other, and they're like looking at each other kind of, you look weird kind of thing. And it makes sense when David Tennant and Matt Smith's Doctors met. It makes sense that David Tennant would be looking at Matt Smith going, oh, you look a bit funny. Oh, you're a bit tall. You've got a nicer suit on kind of thing. But then Matt Smith's looking at David Tennant's Doctor, who he was.
So they do explain that in that because they explain Tennant is confused. No, Smith is confused because he's like, why don't I remember this? I should remember this. And then I think at the end, I might be wrong. It's been ages since I've seen it. I think that what happens in the end is Tennant goes, when it's all said and done, he's like, right, I need to erase this memory, like to preserve so that I can become you and see you later. So I think that's the gist of it.
So he Men in Blacks himself.
Yeah, I'd assume so, yeah.
Because he can Men in Black people with the sonic screwdriver, can't he?
Not with the sonic screwdriver, no.
Oh.
He did a thing to Tate where he made her forget all the Time Lord information that she took in her head so he had to make her forget not only all the Time Lord information, but their entire interactions as well, which what made that parting of the companions
so
like bittersweet.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's a big factor in this one going forward.
Very Spider-Man No Way Home.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, essentially, yeah. Well, on one person. There's a bit of a Deus Ex Machina towards the end. It's not full on Deus Ex, but it for me, I was a bit like, that's a bit convenient. Like, that's a bit like, well, don't have to worry about that big problem anymore. That's fine. So I will say that.
So what did we think of the comic book?
I was pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed it. I thought it would just be a run-of-the-mill Doctor Who tie-in, and I was surprised by how much I enjoyed not only the story, I thought it was interesting, but I found it much funnier than I was anticipating.
Well, I mean, it's Doctor Who. It needs to be funny. Like Doctor Who, that's one of the core things is that.
But just because something needs to be funny or should be funny doesn't mean every writer pulls it off.
Rick and Morty comics.
Exactly. The first two volumes.
Yeah.
So this week we are covering the newly released, October this year, just released, Doctor Who, Once Upon a Time Lord. And
is this new?
It just came out to tie in with the 60th anniversary we're doing.
So I liked the way the story was framed, in that it was his companion telling a story about him, and we're not 100% sure whether it's a fictional story about him or something that actually happened. I thought that was interesting.
Interestingly, the writer, so I'll give the credits first.
Do it.
The writer is particularly interesting, is a guy named Dan Slott, and he's interesting because not only is it's his first run in Doctor Who, apparently he's always been a big fan, it's his first time writing it. He's been a big Marvel and DC writer. Specifically, he wrote for 10 plus years on Amazing Spider-Man.
Oh,
And,
wow.
One of the parts he wrote, I think it kind of started his run, was actually, in my opinion, the last time mainline Spider-Man was good.
Oh, really?
He wrote this, and it's controversial as well, but I'll explain. He wrote this part where, so when he started, he wrote this story where Doc Ock takes over Peter Parker's body.
Oh, I know about
swaps
this, yeah.
him. And it was controversial at the time because what ends up happening is Peter Parker in Doc Ock's old body dies.
Right.
So on the one hand, you're really shitting on Peter Parker by having one of your enemies take over your body and you die in an old body. But it frames it in a way where Peter realizing they having this kind of mind melt thing. Peter realizing that he's not going to be able to take the body back. So what he does is he kind of the experiences within the body he puts Doc Ock through. So they do an interesting part where Doc Ock is living all Peter's experiences growing up, but it's Doc Ock in the body in the memories.
Yeah.
So Doc Ock goes through them and has like with great power comes great responsibility. So Peter dies, but Doc Ock vows to become the superior Spider-Man, as he calls himself.
Right.
So he's like, I will, in your honor, I will be a better. So it's kind of that villainous like ego, like I'm going to be a better Spider-Man, but his goals are to be a superhero and save people and do good.
But I need to be better than you at it.
Exactly. And what happens
I
is,
love a narcissist.
yeah, and he gets his PhD as Parker. He starts Parker Industries, which leads to the billionaire phase for a short time. But what happens is the Green Goblin comes back as standard, but Doc Ock realizes he can't handle it against Green Goblin. Like Green Goblin is too much like chaos for him to actually handle. So it gets to a point where he's like, actually, I need Peter Parker back. And then they do this thing, which, super shenanigans. Parker's like deep down in the brain and he kind of brings it back. But there's a great part where Parker comes back in his body and Doc Ock is like gone now. And Goblin is like, he knows it's Doc Ock. So he's like, come on, Otto, what you gonna do now? 'Cause you've lost, kind of thing. And Parker's like, just his first line back is like, if I were you, I wouldn't be gloating for someone who wears a disgusting man bag and a satchel or whatever he calls it. And Goblin hears this line and goes, oh, you're back. Like he knows just from that line.
Quick.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's
like, cool.
And just the sound like, oh God. Like, so that was a cool part. And I think that ending justified it for a lot of readers. I think that it was controversy when it happened, and then afterwards a lot of people were like, you know what, that was actually really good. And Otto as Parker is such a unique character as well. It's like kind of an asshole Peter Parker, but he's humbled a lot of the time as well, and he's always thinking he's crazy intelligent when he fumbles occasionally and is humbled and stuff. It's a good read. And then he did for like several years after that, and then he's done a lot.
So this guy's
Spider-Man.
done some pretty big Marvel shit, basically.
Exactly, yes.
So who published this?
The publisher is a third party called Titan Comics.
Right.
Who I'd never heard of before. But
Are they British?
I don't think so. Maybe. I haven't seen that specifically. They do quite a few comics and they didn't appear to be overly British.
Yeah.
One thing I will point out is the artists Christopher Jones and Matthew Dow Smith, and colorist Charlie Kirkhoff and Marianne Guzmao, and lettering Richard Starkings of Comic Craft, who I don't recognize, but those are the people who did it.
So right off the top,
are we starting with the arting?
We're starting with the arting. Yeah. You've worked something out. I love it.
Literally what it was in my head was it was going to be, and as always, let's start with the art. But then as I phrased it, I was like, well, starting is the correct.
It's the past participle, yeah. We're starting with the arting.
Yeah, and as a grammar Nazi, I thought you would appreciate the
grammarian.
Right, you've got two options, right? And I saw this earlier and I thought of you. You can either go grammar Nazi or this new one that I saw recently, which I don't know if you'll think is better or worse, but it's right, as in WR, right supremacist.
No.
Which one of the two?
We have a word for it that we use that is grammatically correct, so it's on brand, and it is grammarian.
Yeah, but also, like, we have technical words for things like cranium. We don't hit my cranium on the, you're like, hit my head. Like, it's that, isn't it?
No. No, it's completely different.
It kind of feels like the same.
No, because both of those are pejorative.
I mean, the view of the rest of the world who aren't grammarians, quote
Thank
unquote.
you, fuck's sake. Is it that fucking difficult?
I mean, it's one of those things that I enjoy putting less effort in. I should say, putting less mental thought into. That's why grammar Nazi is just like the one that's in the, it's the one that started on the internet, isn't it? when people are trying to win an argument with, you're actually.
I mean, it's not about winning an argument.
No,
it's just a
you are a true believer, grammarian. Like, you're not doing it for shits and giggles. You actually believe they should all be correct.
Well, one of the blessings of my life is that I was born speaking English in the country that it originated from, and I think English is a gorgeous language, and so I just want to see it used and not abused.
I mean, the internet has ruined that for all languages nowadays.
Well, hasn't it just?
And AI is probably going to make it worse.
Starting with the arting.
I enjoyed the art. But I did notice I enjoyed the color and everything. I thought it was very vibrant, very interesting. I thought the line work and everything was. It's one of those. It's that level where I don't want this to come off as like derogatory. I mean, it was passable for the story. It serviced the story. I didn't notice the art for the most part. It was that level of. If it's good enough to not be noticed, that is a certain quality that is appreciated.
This, for me, fell into the trap.
Janky faces.
Of having, but a very particular kind of jank.
We might have taken the same photo, potentially.
Which we last experienced in the Star Wars comic.
Yes,
where you are seeing illustrations of actual people. And so you have a really defined reference for what these people look like. Because that is an okay illustration of Christopher Eccleston, but it is a bit janky.
It is a bit janky, yes.
As is that.
I took a different one earlier. I took this photo, which is very early on, and it's, for some reason, this artist, I think they're great in every other aspect. For some reason, some face-on views where they're smiling look especially creepy.
So that exact one, I took a note of that because it looks exactly the way he looks in that Neil Gaiman thing where he looks a bit crazed.
I thought it also reminded me more of Jessica Jones, where he plays character Kilgrave.
Yeah, right.
It just looks so creepy. And Tennant can do creepy, we know that. But yeah, I was just...
But there are other points where there's art like this.
My notes, essentially, I preferred the flashback art to the modern day art.
Yeah, so this particular illustration of David Tennant, I think, really captures his facial posture. Not just the physicality of where his face looks and where the lines are, but the way he holds his face. And you know when he does that, like, oh, well, kind of like he's kind of posturing and he's moving his face around and he's thinking as the Doctor? I think they absolutely nailed that in that piece of art to the extent that I can hear David Tennant pulling that face.
Yep, I know what you mean.
Do you know what I mean? And so there are points where it's really nailed on. Where when he illustrates Billie Piper, maybe that's just a kink of this guy's because he illustrates her really well. And the other companion, the companion who's telling the story,
Martha, yeah,
he illustrates Martha beautifully. So to some degree, he does. I've been learning how to draw. You know this. I don't know if the audience know about this, but I've been learning how to draw.
I think you mentioned it.
Drawing women's faces is incredibly difficult. Men's faces, if you get the angles right and you make them look a bit angular, you can kind of make them look right. Femme faces are much more difficult, and this guy excels at drawing women. Like, he draws Martha beautifully well. You know, there's not a single panel with Martha in it where I think she looks off.
The only ones I think, and again, this is my common thing, is when she's smiling. For some reason, when the characters are smiling, it just looks a bit uncanny valley. Like, it fits, but there's something there that doesn't quite ring true. And potentially, people smiling might be a very difficult artist thing. Yeah, so fair enough. But I thought for the most part, the art, served the story. Like, it kept me engaged. It didn't take me out of it at all. And I really liked the different styles for the modern day versus the flashbacks.
Yeah, I think the flashbacks look beautiful with all those heavy lines and all of that black. And then you can see they do the 1960s thing of not quite cross-hatching, but dot shading.
Yeah.
Which is really reminiscent of John Romita Sr.'s Spider-Man art.
And then that plays into the origins of the 60s Doctor.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, it all just kind of ties in. So all in all, I'd say the art is really fun. It's just, again, I think it's that difficulty, and I don't think this is a slight on the artist. I think this is that these comic book artists, their skill is illustration, right? And their skill is developing a character and then learning how to draw that character in a million different poses. That's what comic book artists need to be good at, right? They need to be good at creating a compelling looking silhouette, essentially, particularly for superhero-y stuff. I know that's not where we
Yeah.
are today, but that's what this
There's
guy's
some-
bread and butter.
Some crossover, yeah.
And then posing them well. And I think the challenge comes in when you are representing a real person. And we saw that the art in that Star Wars comic we were looking at was fantastic throughout, right up until the moment they had to draw Luke.
Specifically, I think with that one, it was like the most human faces seem to have the most issue. But maybe as readers and viewers, we're noticing it more with human faces.
And I think the thing is, it's not just human faces, it's recognizable human faces. Because if I was looking at those illustrations of David Tennant and Christopher Eccleston out of context, having never seen those people's faces, I would be like, yeah, that's a face, right?
Yeah.
Like, they're perfectly good. They're good illustrations. It's the fact that they're representing a real person who I would recognize in real life that it's an extra layer of complexity. You're not just drawing a believable face, you're drawing a believable version of Christopher Eccleston's face.
Yeah.
And that makes it so much more difficult, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I think that's definitely an area we, I think, have to give some allowance.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely, because it's really fucking difficult. And again, this would have been made to a budget, to a timescale.
Yeah. I think what that was going to be my point was I think any artist who does any of this stuff, they could do a great, like, very realistic version of whatever we're criticizing, but it would take more time and effort to do that thing well. And as you say, they've got the time and the budget, so they're just like, I need to get all these panels out. I'm going to do as good a job as I can.
And again, I think it's interesting that as you say, in that very slightly different art style for the flashbacks, with the heavier black, that's kind of more of a more illustrative, less realistic style. David Tennant looks fantastic.
Yeah,
like and again, the core thing that you really want to look great in an adaptation of Doctor Who are the monsters, and they look fucking fantastic.
I loved the pyromeths.
Yeah, the pyromeths look fantastic. They're scary. I think they're a bit scary.
As soon as they turn from kids to pyromeths, I was like, oh, here we go. Like, this is when they said the pyromeths, I immediately just imagined like a human wearing a suit of an alien. And then immediately I was like, oh, thank God, they're taking the advantage of a comic book. They're not just doing like, well, it's Doctor Who, so we have to make a guy in a mask, which they do later.
Yeah.
But I think that's like more of like a reference to the original, to the actual TV show. But I like that in this moment, they were like, let's just make some weird fucking things that we couldn't do on the TV show. Like, let's take that leap for this one.
Because one of the things that Doctor Who kind of stayed true to the original 60s version in the reboots, they didn't use a whole heap of CGI.
No, I mean, Daleks and Cybermen were basically exactly the same. Like,
I mean, modernized, but yeah, no, totally. Like, they used a lot of costuming and a lot of props, and that's part of the charm and the aesthetic of it. And I think they totally knocked it out of the park in this comic. Like, I mean, you know, janky faces aside, and we've talked about that, and it's a bugbear of mine. We know this.
Yeah.
But again, it's kind of permissible and explainable here because they're taking on such a big challenge in representing actual actors. But in general, the art looks great. I think it's coloured beautifully.
Yeah,
the colorists on this were fantastic.
The colour was so good that I stopped noticing after a while.
Yeah, totally.
Which for me is like, again, it just supported the story fully. I was engaged in it. Like, the darker moments were like a right kind of like dark in a cave pyramid kind of thing. But then as soon as you were out, the campfire look was always good when you return to that. So yeah, art was never boring, and it only enhanced the story, which is great. What did you think of the story, or more specifically, what was the story? Can you tell us?
No.
Can't tell us what the story was.
No, because it's always bad when I do it.
Come on.
No,
I believe in you.
You're better at this than me.
Yeah, but that's why we're pushing your skills.
No, I'm batting this one back to you once again.
All right, but just in case, if I was like a Doctor Who fan, I was like, I've never read this comic. Like, what can you recommend about it? What is it good?
So the Doctor is a time-traveling alien.
Yeah, I'll give it. I'll allow you. Like, I already know that stuff, so you don't need to get into that. Like, what is the Doctor doing?
So the Doctor's doing Doctor stuff.
Yes.
This is the thing that I'm sorry. Like, the story was fun, but it was a bit generic. The Doctor's doing Doctor stuff, fighting aliens.
See, I would have gone the route that you already mentioned earlier, which was the story, the way it's framed.
Oh, right, yeah. So the story's really beautifully framed. So the Doctor's companion has been captured by a bunch of aliens who feed off of stories.
So I made a note of this, and I think you'll agree.
Why are you cutting me off?
Because tangents.
You're making me do this, and now you're cutting me off, and I don't like it.
We'll return. Oh, hang on. You don't like cutting off and going on tangents. Fuck off.
So anyway, COD.
So the explanation for the stories is like, oh yeah, because they one thing I like the spanning explanation across all the doctors.
Fantastic.
He's been telling companions about these pyromaths for as long as he's been alive in all his forms. So I thought that was particularly good because it enhanced like the severity of like who you're about to meet, and it feels like a technique they could never use in the TV show for obvious reasons. So it's like, again, you making use of the medium of comics, which for us, we're gonna be like, this is better than the TV show, but because it's doing things the TV show couldn't.
Because it's doing things you could only do in this medium.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally.
So that enhanced the severity of the creatures. They feed off the psychic energy.
Yeah.
I feel like that's one of the most overused terms in Doctor Who, behind TARDIS and Sonic Screwdriver. It's literally like, how do we explain this concept relating to these aliens feeding psychic energy? Like that's all you need.
Standard, isn't it?
And it's not just Doctor Who, it's common as well. But I thought you'd get a kick out of like, why is this, like, we talk about science fiction explanations. Why does this work? Psychic, I made it know, it's like, it's the equivalent of like, how do you explain this machine working? Well, I put the word quantum, and then that catch-all solves everything. Psychic energy is the...
It's a cosmic treadmill.
It's cosmic, it's quantum, it's psychic energy.
Yeah, and that's so Marvel and DC, isn't it?
Exactly. So back to the story, as you were saying.
So she has been kidnapped by an alien race that feed off the psychic energy that happens when you are telling a story. The better the story, the more they get from it. But then if the story gets boring, they just banish you to a realm that the Doctor can't find.
Or when the story just ends.
Or when the story ends. And so she is telling a story about the Doctor.
Well done.
Searching for the most valuable thing in the world.
Perfect summary. I'd say that was a great one.
Thank you.
And now you've proven you can do it. So we'll go back and forth. Sometimes I'll do them, sometimes, But I thought this one was a good one for you to do because you just mentioned the key part earlier anyway.
And again, I love a well-framed story. And I love a story that's more than just a story. And I think the thing that kept me going with this, because it was a kind of generic Doctor Who story.
Well, here's the thing, like, it's not quite a generic Doctor Who story. It's kind of like the one below where they sometimes use this kind of device. So the generic one is Doctor Who lands somewhere, something's afoot, they investigate, oh no, there's aliens, oh, they've got a big plan, oh, the Doctor's going to run, they got to run round, oh, here's the last thing, let's save this, and then maybe bittersweet, maybe happy ending, and then back to the TARDIS.
One of the Chameleon Circuit songs I liked, by the way, was an awful lot of running to do. Because that is the thing, like, he's always running somewhere, isn't he?
And that definitely separates him from a lot of, like, the heroes, even, like historical literature. How many heroes are, like, fighting for something? Doctor Who's like, I'm smart and I can fix all this, but in terms of, like, any actual, like, combat or fighting or anything, run away. Like,
he doesn't throw punches, does he?
Exactly. But so I'd say this is like the one under where they occasionally will do a meta storytelling where someone else is the main character.
Yeah.
And then it's about the Doctor. So this is like if the run of the mill story is A, this is a B. Like this is what they do when they don't do A.
And it's a fun way to frame a story because for a lot of it I was like, is this fiction? Well, no, I mean,
I know what you mean,
within the context of the story, is this fiction?
My first reaction was like, wait, what? And I was like, no, oh right, I get what you mean.
Within the context of the narrative.
Yes.
Is this B narrative or A narrative that we're seeing of the Doctor going on this journey looking for this thing?
And they really subtly play with that. Because at no point are the pyromaths like, wait, is this real? And Martha goes, find out at the end. Ooh. Like they never do that over the top. It's very subtle how it's just a thing as a reader. If you're interested, you go, hang on, is this real? Like it allows you to ponder that.
And I think what's interesting is that they play with the way the Doctor speaks a little bit to give you a sense that it's his voice coming through her voice. And I think that's really interesting. And it's really subtle, really, really subtle. But I clocked it and I noticed it and I kind of noticed that theme running through it. And I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah. I was surprised. I like the pyromaths. And when the concept of them and what they were doing, I was like, okay, so they're a story device. Fair enough. Like if it's a good story, then fine. I was surprised how much I related to the pyromaths. Like, did you get that at all?
No.
So there were so many lines. I was like, we say this stuff on the podcast.
Oh,
I was like,
right, on that level.
Pyromaths?
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, totally.
Not that I'm capturing people and torturing them to tell me stories, But like the couple of the lines.
I mean, with the way that artists are treated in the comic book industry, it does kind of feel that way sometimes.
The artists especially, absolutely. How comics broke me, I think is the one. Look it up if you're interested. But so many lines like Martha starts a story and it's about someone else and then it's about the Doctor. And one of the Pyromasts just in all caps goes, "Not a promising start."
Well, it's when she says "once upon a time."
Yeah, exactly. I was like, "Oh my God, are you me?" And there's like, "This is poor storytelling." And I was like, "Oh my God, I feel seen." And then,
yeah, no, I get it. I see what you mean.
And then they talk about, he uses his psychic paper, his psychic wallet paper, whatever. And they go, "Why? That wasn't mentioned in the first story. Is that a thing he normally has? Why were you like?"
And she's like, "Well, no, he only uses it when he needs it." Like,
was it like Chekhov's psychic paper? Like, you didn't mention it in the first story, so why has he got it in the second one?
That one threw me off because I'm used to his kit. Obviously,
yeah, that's a rarer used one, but still quite common.
Because the sonic screwdriver comes out.
It's iconic.
Yeah, it's iconic, and it's different every time, and some of them are bigger and smaller, which is great fun for them. I have wondered though, because he has 2 hearts.
Yep.
Do you reckon he has 2
livers?
No.
Pancreases?
Penises. Obviously, penis. It's obviously penis, Ryan.
So the thing we talked about this we talked about this general subject last week.
Yeah.
If it's family friendly, no,
doesn't have a penis.
It cannot be verified. It's like I said with Batman's dick. It's like when they finally showed Batman's dick in the comic, that's when it became confirmed he had one in the first place.
Well, I say this because there's an interview with Billie Piper from back in the day with Graham Norton.
I know exactly where you're going with this, but go on.
Where Graham Norton speculates about this, and she jokes that she called David 10-inch, and they were trying to work out if it was 1 10-inch or 2 5s. And that just really amuses me.
I mean, it feels like one of those things that like you could explore the lore of the Time Lord to be like, is it 2 penises or 4 balls? Like,
oh my God, imagine sitting down.
I feel like he couldn't do that with the amount of running he does.
A 10-inch would be uncomfortable.
I mean, the 4 balls specifically. That'd be the worst part.
Yeah, because
maybe it's one of those it's bigger on the inside deals.
The TARDIS has always been weird to me because it being bigger on the outside than the inside was obviously like a set limitation.
Yeah, it had to be, yeah. I mean, it played for a fun, like, I don't think they had to do it. It just played for fun, like, there's the box, and then open the box. Oh, in somewhere else. Oh, it's bigger. Yeah.
And again, like, he invites somebody into the TARDIS in this, doesn't he? And they go, oh, it's much bigger on the inside. And you go, oh, it's the TARDIS.
It literally, that's one of those things that it has to happen every episode.
Yeah.
If someone new's in the TARDIS, like, it's a commitment to realism. Because if that happened, everyone would say that.
Yeah,
every
they would,
time.
yeah.
And the Doctor just goes, yep. Like, he's not got a quip or a response or anything. He's just, yep, yes, it is.
I've often wondered why he doesn't try and find a new chameleon circuit.
Why he doesn't try and find one?
Yeah.
Well, I'm assuming chameleon circuit is a thing from the show, but I don't know what it is.
Right. So the reason that the TARDIS is always a police box is because it used to have a thing called a chameleon circuit,
right,
which would disguise it.
I think it's been mentioned as just he's fine with it.
Yeah, he's just like totally cool with it being broken.
He had that thing where I think people have had it with like cars or various vehicles or stuff where something cosmetic breaks. And you think, I need to get that fixed. And not quite the level of like dangerous, but something like that. And then he realized after that in-between time before getting it fixed, he realized, oh, this doesn't matter actually. Like he could go to medieval times or alien planets or whatever, and no one looks at the box twice.
It's so weird. Yeah, I mean, because a police box is a thing that we used to have in Britain. So it was a blue phone box that had a phone in it that you could call the police on. You picked the phone up and it went straight to your local police station. So if he was disguising it in 1960s Britain, perfect. Anywhere else it goes, it's incredibly conspicuous.
Well, I mean, you say that, but again, I think the point is it lands here and that most people go, oh, it's one of the, like, it's the same now with telephone boxes. Like, we still have telephone boxes around, the red ones, and I've walked past them. I've never gone, hang on, that's unusual. They don't have those around anymore, and gone in and investigated. I just walk past and go, oh, it's one of those old ones. Like, it hasn't been removed or anything.
A subtle joy in my life is walking around London and watching Americans get excited by phone boxes.
Yeah, it's one of the things they don't have, do they? So,
well, they had pay phones, but they'd be like attached to a business and stuff. They didn't have like the box.
Well, they did have the see-through boxes.
They do, don't they? Yeah.
Remember the Colin Farrell film Phone Booth?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they had those, but ours were like, they looked a bit more European
They're
compared
ornate.
to theirs. Yeah.
They're very ornate, and they had a royal seal on them and shit.
Exactly. But the psychic paper, that's like a thing he uses occasionally. It's definitely like a quick plot device, but it's also like, if you are an all-powerful alien god, essentially, why wouldn't you have something like that?
Using it to solve that final riddle.
Loved that.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool.
So clever.
Because they set it up, they told us he had it, and then he used it he said, I don't know how to solve this riddle. And he obviously did, because he had a MacGuffin.
Yeah.
And that's the Doctor's thing, is often he has a MacGuffin.
But that's a MacGuffin that he's been using for years.
Yeah, totally. And it's one of his tools.
Exactly. So it was a clever use of the writer to be like, oh, let's not make a thing and then introduce our own MacGuffin. There's the MacGuffin. Let's set up a problem that it can solve. And I, for one, I was like, I thought he was going to answer the riddle, or I thought he was going to do something like that. And then he pulled out the paper, and I went, oh, that's smart.
Yeah, no, it was cool, and I liked it. And again, very David Tennant.
And also very Pyrometh of us. The Pyrometh were like me, was like, it's a river mouth time like I was that, like, and then the Pyromeths were like I'm a Pyrometh, like we are Pyromeths.
I mean, yeah, maybe. I mean, again, because one of the things that I kind of felt about this story is that fun plot, lots of story, very much in keeping with the TV show itself. Not a whole lot of deeper meaning or broader meaning.
No, it was a fun adventure.
But then choosing to view the Pyromeths as people who think about and talk about story, suddenly you have a little bit of a deeper meaning in there. This is a story about the way we consume story, right?
Essentially, yeah. I mean, that could be construed as a deeper meaning. Maybe intentional, maybe unintentional. Like,
doesn't matter.
It could be a framing device, or it could have some deeper meaning. But death of the author and all that bollocks.
I was literally about to say, have we talked about the death of the author here? Have we talked about the death of the author?
I'm pretty sure we've talked about death of the author. We must have done on this. I mean, do you want to give listeners who might not have that episode a quick rundown?
The death of the author is a theory by Roland Barthes, which posits that once a story is read by somebody else, the author is now dead because their interpretation of the story is no more valuable than anybody else's. It's one of the core facets of literary criticism, which is that my opinion, providing that I'm able to evidence it within the text, is as valuable as anybody else's, including that of the author. Which is really funny when you get into J.K. Rowling, who loves to do revisionist stuff with her texts. So like 20 years later, she'll be like, Dumbledore's gay. And you're like, there's no textual evidence for that.
Retconning to win points in the modern day is not the same as actually pioneering like a gay character for that specific reference.
Because like if Dumbledore was actually gay, fucking well cool.
Yeah, but then again, it's the coward's way. It's the coward's pandering of being like, well, I've left enough space that he could be. It's like, it's not the same. Doesn't count.
It's not the same as actually just having made him gay.
You make Jude Law kiss a Mads Mikkelsen on the mouth in the Fantastic Beasts series, or it doesn't count. And I don't think they've done that.
Did Jude Law play a young Dumbledore?
Yeah, in the Fantastic Beasts films.
Oh, he'd be so good at it.
He was great casting. One of the few good things about those films.
Yeah, that and Johnny Depp was meant to be pretty good in them, wasn't he?
I didn't like him. The antagonist in it starts out as Colin Farrell, and then the reveal is that it's Johnny Depp's character who has turned himself to look like Colin
he's
Farrell's
polyjuiced
character.
himself.
Yeah, exactly. Colin Farrell was way better in my opinion.
Colin Farrell's fucking fantastic in everything, though.
Exactly. There's going to be a Penguin TV show coming out at some point, and if you haven't seen the Batman, he's unrecognizable as the Penguin. And now he's doing an entire TV show, which means we get to cover a Tom King written... Oh, wait, Tom King? Did he do a Penguin comic?
If he did, you're going to find it.
I'm hoping he did. I mean, we're doing something.
Was this the Robert Pattinson one?
Yes.
I've not seen it.
It's so good. It's 3 hours, but we'll watch it at some point.
Because I've heard Robert Pattinson was excellent in it as
Fantastic,
well.
yeah.
I mean, he's good. Like, he's a really good actor.
So my thing with actors is I judge them as being great if they nail two opposite performances.
Yeah.
I first said that with my claim to fame on this, that for people who have listened to me talk about it, is Chiwetel Ejiofor, who was 12 Years a Slave. Years before that, I saw him in Serenity, which was the Firefly film, and Four Brothers, the Mark Wahlberg film.
Yeah.
And he plays a tight-wound religious extremist, but very calm and collected and very stern in his belief and cold ass killing people for his religious views.
Yeah.
And then in Four Brothers, he's a loud, boisterous, overly masculine gangster.
Oh, cool.
So he played both those so well, and I went, that's a great actor. And then a few years later, won the Oscar in 12 Years a Slave. And I was like, I fucking called it.
I mean, Robert Pattinson is one of those that he was in a stinker. He was in something that was really popular but not very good.
Some would argue. I would agree, but
many would argue with me. But I think he was like, the first time I really saw him in anything was in the adaptation of Henry V, and he was playing the French prince, and he was fucking fantastic in it.
For me, it was, I saw him in The Lighthouse. Which
He was great in The Lighthouse, wasn't he?
Disappears in.
Yeah.
Good Time, which, if anyone does know, it's made by the Safdie brothers who made Uncut Gems. So it's, their thing is, how stressed out can I make the audience while also keeping them watching? And I saw him in something else that I can't remember off the top of my head, but I saw a couple of things, and he was so different in each one. He was really good in each one, and I hadn't seen anything else by him. And I went, I now know he's a good actor because he's done these very different roles really well. Then I saw an interview with him, and when I saw the interview, I was like, oh my God, he's amazing.
Yeah.
Because how different all those roles are from his normal self. He is quite for lack of a better word, kind of camp. Like, he's kind of effeminate. Like, that's just his normal thing.
Very articulate, very charming.
Yes, very posh schoolboy-esque.
Yes, totally.
So for him to then disappear into these like whatever the time period of Lighthouse, like fisherman who smokes all the time, or Good Time where he's like a con artist, kind of like desperate criminal kind of.
Yeah.
He disappears into these roles, and they're so different from his normal self.
Because I think the role he's had that's probably closest to his normal self was Cedric Diggory.
Yeah, and he was just
posh public schoolboy.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Totally. Yeah. I mean, I've only heard good things about the Batman.
It's great.
I only heard good things about it.
We'll get in at some point. So back to the comic.
Hey.
I like. One thing that I did think a few seconds ago. I've not actually said the name of the comic that we're doing, so I think I'm going to say it here in isolation and cut it into the top.
Oh, you're making yourself more work. I love that for you.
I mean, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, anyways. I'm in the weeds. I'm doing the editing. This won't be anything.
Yeah.
So this week we are covering the newly released October this year, just released Doctor Who, Once Upon a Time Lord. And
is this new?
It's just came out to tie in with the 60th anniversary we're doing.
Oh shit, I didn't realise this was a new title.
Yeah.
I thought this was like a historic one.
It's kind of why I picked it, because I was trying to genuinely look at like what are the best Doctor Who comics.
Yeah.
And I looked up and I was like, there wasn't much. There was like one or two listicles.
Yeah.
But there wasn't much the fact that there wasn't people being like, these are the good ones, these are the banned ones. I thought either not many people are reading them, but they've been sold and produced for so long that there must be a paying audience for them.
Yeah.
Or the quality has kind of kept a consistent level where there's not much like, these are bad and these are awesome. Like, they're mostly just this kind of level. So
are Capaldi, Whittaker and Smith left out here because this new Doctor Who thing is got Tennant in it?
Yeah, it's tying in with Tennant being in the 60th anniversary.
Because this is why I assumed it was older, because I assumed that when they were running through all the Doctors, they would have included the current, the last three.
Yeah, I guess it just makes sense that they're doing the Tennant story, so it's all the ones up to Tennant.
How annoyed would you be if you were one of the other three and you were like, why are you fucking leaving me out, dude?
I mean, what's interesting is they leave out the War Doctor, so that was like a pivotal like backstory from Eccleston onwards.
Yeah.
So they've left him out, but I guess he didn't really have any companioning advententures, so that kind of makes sense. Back to the story as it's happening. It goes from this Moby Dick-esque story, which is quite fun pirates and stuff, and it played with the weight of the TARDIS as a plot point, which I thought was great.
Kind of felt like a Star Wars story.
Yeah, sandworms kind of thing.
Yeah, like a kind of a spaghetti western adventure story, but set in space.
Yeah.
That's kind of Star Wars' whole shtick, isn't it?
That was more Star Wars, and then the next part was more Indiana Jones.
Yes, totally.
I made a note of, there was a point where they were talking about the Martha's talking about where they are next, where he is next, and he's at the Egyptian pyramids.
Yeah.
I say, the line is something, 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 until it was excavated by some of the worst villains in history. And I immediately went,
the Nazis.
I went, the British?
Oh, yeah, so true.
Because
It was going to be one of the two, wasn't it?
We're normally the ones doing the excavating. And then literally as soon as I said the Nazis, I then looked at the year again and went, 1940. Like that period, that was them.
If this was an American franchise, 100% it would have been the British, not the Nazis.
If it was outside of 35 to 45, it would have been the British.
But no.
We were busy during that time.
And again, that's so Indiana Jones, isn't it?
And then soon after that, he introduced himself as from the British Museum.
Yes.
And the woman he's talking to goes, "Oh, that's awful." And I went, see, I was right about the British.
No, he introduces himself as being from the British Museum, and then he goes, "Oh no, that's awful." It's him that doesn't like it.
Well, someone doesn't like it, and I felt vindicated in my initial reaction to it being the British.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I mean, it was fun that he was from the British Museum because it made total sense that he would be grave robbing.
Yeah.
Didn't it? Like,
there was one panel which I loved, like as an example of Tennant's like all over the place-ness, scattiness. I don't know what you'd call it, but it was a good example of that from the TV show. And his whole panel where he just goes through a lot of stuff in a quick succession. So he's talking to Dr. Rana Rashid and says, "Oh, you are Dr. Rana Rashid." Immediately goes, "Half English, half Egyptian, studied at Oxford." And I was like, why is the race matter? Why you mentioned that?
I think that feeds into something that David Tennant's Doctor was quite particular with.
I took that as I think he literally he knows all historical people, especially from Earth, because he is, as an alien, he's fascinated with Earth.
And so he's going through the Rolodex of his mind.
And he's picked it out.
And he would do that a lot. And like David Tennant's Doctor particularly had this uncanny ability to like recognize and remember people.
And I think, and immediately after that, he goes, "And though I usually point and laugh at archaeologists, for you I'll make an exception because you're marvelous. Love your work." Like,
yeah.
Which is it? Do you hate archaeologists, or are you fascinated by the best ones of them? Like, I don't understand. It was an inconsistency. I was like, that does feel very Tennant-y Doctor.
Well, it did, didn't it? And again, I found that quite grounding.
Yeah, exactly. I had that kind of two minds of like, that doesn't make sense. I was like, he didn't make sense a lot of the time. So
I mean, I think something that the writers really did here is that, as I mentioned earlier, I could kind of hear David Tennant delivering a lot of these lines. Like, I think they did a really great job of capturing his specific speech patterns as the Doctor on the page.
For me, this is kind of making me think of Dan Slott as like kind of putting him in that like writers to look out for kind of thing.
Yeah, totally.
Because, I mean, again, I enjoyed his Spider-Man run and especially the biggest parts of it. So, and this is just kind of reinforced it. He's good at capturing voices.
When David Tennant played the Doctor, did he affect an English accent or did he remain Scottish?
No, he was English, yeah.
Was he English?
Yeah. Basically, I've never seen him have a Scottish accent except for when he's in an interview.
And
he's
Macbeth.
only ever English. I mean, yeah, obviously, yeah. But I haven't seen that. But I mean, he never,
really good.
Yeah, he never puts his Scottish accent in anything.
Or was he Macbeth or was he Hamlet? I know I've definitely seen him as Hamlet, and he was fantastic.
There was a great line from the Eccleston run, which I always think of, where when Rose reveals that he's an alien, and Rose goes, "How are you an alien with a northern accent?" And his response is, "You think Earth is the only place with a north?"
That's Christopher Eccleston, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely stupid response, but also you can't. It's that meme of like where you're about to say something back and you actually go, "Oh, actually, that does make sense technically."
I'm just double checking what Shakespeare he's done.
Probably. I mean, those English actors have probably done all of them.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure I've seen a recording of him as Macbeth and as Hamlet, and he was fantastic in both. Again, he's David Tennant's one of that pantheon of great English actors who did a lot of stage work before they went to screen. See also Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's this real thing with actors where the stage work is for them and then the film work is for everyone else. Do you know what I mean?
One for them, one for them, one for me kind of thing.
Yeah, because he likes being on stage, doesn't he?
Yeah, cool. I mean, all the best ones do. Patrick Stewart, technically his television debut was, especially for any kind of consistent role, was Star Trek. He was purely stage before that. And he would have made a great Doctor. He wouldn't
have been a very energetic Doctor, though.
I think he would have surprised back like earlier on. Like if he was in that,
he's poorly now, isn't he?
Yeah, now he wouldn't. But I mean, in his prime, like I think he would have been great. Couple points here, which again reinforce this. I genuinely made a note. Why is this comic so funny? Like one of the Nazis falling over and just goes "Akte Liebe." It's like that's needlessly funny. And then the bit of that very, very Indiana Jones with the speaking to the Egyptian god / alien. Yeah. And it's like, do you wish to travel to the realm of the dead? And I was like, yeah, dead. Just died.
And then David Tennant's like, the doctor's like, yeah, I want to go, but I want to come back.
I had the thing of like, how is he going to get around this?
Yeah.
And it was literally just semantics. Like, that was funny in itself. But I just like yes, I'd like to go to the realm of the dead. Bang, dead. Like, the timing, the panel timing was so good for comedic stuff.
Yeah, no, it was funny, wasn't it? And who doesn't want to see a Nazi die?
I mean, that's always fun.
Like, yeah, absolutely. If you're going to have a Nazi, you might as well kill him off.
That, again, especially Indiana Jones, of it being the Nazis being the bad guys as well. I do feel like Dan Slott was like, I'm going to do a Star Wars bit, and I'm going to do a Indiana Jones bit, and then the last bit kind of like meant to be it was very Doctor Who homage, where it was this psychic land of the dead, where all the previous enemies that the Doctor had killed or caused their death through inaction were there. And I thought that was interesting because you had the different reactions to the Doctor.
But wasn't it great that there was a monster who, this like guy turned up and we thought he was going to be a villain, and then he transformed into a werewolf, and it turned out the Doctor had mercy killed him, and he was grateful. I'm pretty sure, was from an episode, like an actual episode. So all of it was callbacks to episodes Tennant had been in. Yeah, I thought that, again, like lots of little twists and turns, but they all kind of made sense, and they were all quite fun.
Yeah, there's one part which I maybe would class as maybe a plot hole, and it's hard to pin down plot holes in this kind of world.
Yeah, totally.
But they kind of address it as well themselves, and I don't think they adequately answered it. He gets to this character who is a previous character, and it wasn't one of the best Tennant moments.
Yeah.
This alien was basically, she is a giant spider woman. So she's human top and then giant spider second half, basically.
Not the way around you want that.
I mean, any part spider's bad, really. But in the episode, the actual TV show, what happened was she had all her eggs were in the core of the earth, and she was doing something to basically awaken them to then rise up and like devour everything around, like using the earth as kind of an incubator for eggs. And Tennant basically works it so it's like, actually, I'm killing all your offspring. And that moment, it was played not in a kind of like, I've saved the day. It was Tennant, like, you could see this Doctor's face of like, I'm killing a bunch of alien children to save the Earth.
Yeah.
And it's immediately like, you can tell it's weighing on him immediately. So him going back to this character, for me and other fans who saw that, was like, oh, this is significant.
Yeah.
Not that alien is not gone back to or remembered, but the ones who do are like, oh, this was a moment.
Yeah.
But the plot hole, he goes to her and he says, I need to find out the secret, the most valuable secret of the universe, essentially. And she's like, well, you believe that I'm your imagination because you're hallucinating. So how can I tell you something that you don't already know?
Yeah.
And his response is, well, I choose to believe this is real.
Yeah.
And then she's like, all right, fair enough, I'll tell you. For me, I was like, I don't think that was adequately explained. Yeah. I don't think they even really tried to explain it. So
no, I mean, that was the attempt
at
an explanation, wasn't it?
Yeah, I choose to believe. Oh, well, fair enough then.
I mean, that's American political discourse right there in a nutshell, isn't it?
I don't want facts. I want to be angry.
Totally.
But beyond that minor thing, then I didn't think about it as much because immediately afterwards, the reveal is the most valuable thing in the world that I'm looking for is the home planet of the Pyromeths. And again, the Pyromeths character, like, oh God, he's real. Is he coming here? Like, shitting on the story for so long, and they'd be like, oh my God, the character's coming to kill us. So, yeah, I thought that was a great ending.
Yeah, no, totally. It was great.
I wasn't anticipating being so engrossed in the story and then having that like, oh, it's that thing, like having that reaction.
And it was brief. You know, it was only like 64 pages, wasn't it?
Yeah. There was then a short story after that felt like a kind of tack on with Christopher Eccleston and Rose. And that I thought was like a cute play on the language translator of the TARDIS.
Yeah, it was a little epilogue, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I thought it was fun enough where it was a fun little reveal. Like, we had several of them in the Tennant story. There was one in the Eccleston story, which was we want to try and talk in a way where the aliens don't understand us, but the translator's translating everything for them in their language. So we'll use homonyms?
Yeah, homonyms.
And I thought you'd appreciate that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And then they talk in rhymes of the words, but not actually. They have great panels depicting what is happening from both sides. So it was a fun little add-on, but I think the main meat of this comic was the Tennant story.
Yeah, totally. And again, yeah, totally. And it was fun. It was just good fun, wasn't it?
Yeah. And again, like you said earlier, it wasn't especially deep or meaningful like some comics that we've considered our favorites, but I had a great time reading this. And I think going in with lowish expectations definitely helped.
Because I think one of the things that we have realized is that outside of the Star Wars stuff, the tie-ins tend to not be very good. I think we had that with Five Nights at Freddy's.
Yeah, well, I've made this point before. Anything can be good. It's only a cash grab tie-in if it's uninspired or,
Yeah.
But any artist or any writer can be given a work and say, hey, we need a comic for Doctor Who. Can you do us one?
And it's evident here that it was a good writer. I think the benchmark by which I would judge something like this, having read the Rick and Morty stuff, is this story of a quality whereby if I saw it played out in the main series on the screen, would I think it was good? And I think this would have made a really great Doctor Who episode, or a couple, like a 2 or 3 episode arc or something. I
agree with your opinion. I kind of feel maybe a bit differently in that I feel like I'm judging it more of like, is this a good comic in itself away from the TV show?
And totally, there are things that happen here that couldn't have happened in the TV show.
Yeah.
And that makes it special because, as we've said, they use the medium well.
If you imagine, if you would come into this not knowing any Doctor Who, like maybe you knew of Doctor Who very, very...
tangentially?
I genuinely was thinking tangentially. I was like, is that the proper word for this? Very tangentially. Would you read this comic? Do you think you would enjoy it to the same degree?
Yeah, because I'm not a Whovian. So I know a bit about Doctor Who.
It feels like the question of this podcast is Jamie actually a Whovian or not?
Turns out I've just got a massive life-size TARDIS in my living room.
I think it's just called a house.
No, if only my house was bigger on the inside. Yeah, definitely. I enjoyed it.
I would definitely recommend. Like I said before, if you've been into any Doctor Who, I think this is quality Doctor Who adventures if you're already into that.
And again, going into this, I hadn't clocked that it was brand new. That definitely changes things because it felt to me as though it was from the early 2000s.
Apparently, there's a lot of other great Doctor Who stories. Like I said before, there wasn't a huge indicator of a variety of quality, so it seems like they're quite consistent.
But I think the thing is, Doctor Who is kind of timeless.
Oh, yeah, especially. I mean, Doctor Who, I would rank up there as the television version of James Bond.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, no, that's a really great comparison. Yeah, it does have a timeless quality to it, doesn't it?
And how many other characters, even short of live action representation, have this kind of new face regeneration, spanning eras kind of character? Because you could do that in comics and literature and everything. I don't think many have.
Well, I think this is the interesting thing is that in comic book fans are very accustomed to seeing a million different iterations of the same character. What Doctor Who did is find a really elegant, charming, interesting solution for having a series that spanned multiple generations and multiple main actors.
I'm pretty sure, I don't know if this is 100% accurate, I'm almost certain that it is. I think when the first Doctor Who series was very different from the Doctors we know now.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, for example, the character is traveling with his grandchildren.
Yes.
And they've had to apparently they've attempted a few times to retcon explain that.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't make sense to the Doctors we know now. But apparently the first actor, I think he died, and then they did the regeneration angle to bring in a new actor.
The regeneration wasn't always a thing. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It came out of necessity, and it's because they wanted to be able to explain the reason there was a new actor. But it's become a core part of the series now, and I think it's a really elegant solution.
I think the times where they actually do play into it and actually explore this concept of a character who not only they don't just change physically, they become a new personality.
Yeah.
And that incorporates that I think that was so that actors don't have to do the previous actor's interpretation.
Exactly, yeah, 100%.
And occasionally they do play with this. Like Tennant, when he was about to regenerate, he had a long run of
Please don't be Ginger.
Yeah. He had when he first turned from Eccleston to Tennant, the first thing he said, he felt his tongue in his mouth and went, new teeth. But there was a part where when he was about to regenerate, he was telling someone what was going to happen, and they're like, it sounds like you're still going to be alive. And he said, well, in a way it's a death because I cease to be who I am now. I become someone else, but I lose what I am right now, and I feel like that part of me dies. And I think there's a larger exploration of like growing older and going through life and becoming a different person. And
yeah, totally. Yeah, no, it's allegorically quite rich, isn't it? And again, like Bond is the obvious other place, like cinematic franchise where we see the same character portrayed by different actors. And I think every Bond has a slightly different personality.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, Pierce Brosnan's Bond wasn't quite as stoic and gritty as
Sean Connery?
No, the new one.
Oh, Daniel Craig.
The new one. He's been Bond for like 20 years
newest.
or something. And then Sean Connery's Bond was a bit more suave. And, you know, they're all a little bit different.
I mean, Bonds, there's a running theory. I mean, it's basically fact. Bonds tend to represent whatever the scene of action films is, or action stars and characters at the time. Like and Daniel Craig was very much a product of the Bourne series.
Yes, totally. And it's interesting because there's a Bond who only did one film. He was an American actor playing British, and he wore a hat. So he was in On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
I'm almost getting this. There's a Simpsons joke, which I think is why I can remember it. I can't remember. There's a Simpsons joke where Pierce Brosnan plays an AI.
Yeah.
And they install them, and like they're picking a voice for the AI. He goes, "What about the best James Bond who ever lived?" And Marge goes, "Oh, but and it was the old one." And then you go, "No, Pierce Brosnan."
So On Her Majesty's Secret Service has George Lazenby in it.
George Lazenby, yes, that's
and
the one.
George Lazenby wears a hat for some of it, because it's the late 60s, and that was cool. And it was, you know, the perfect representation of what cool was at the time.
Yeah,
he almost looks a bit like Austin Powers. He has like frills on his shirt and stuff. So Bond reflected whatever the kind of current climate of action films was, and I think that's perfectly represented in the transition between Pierce Brosnan and Daniel Craig, because Pierce Brosnan's Bond became very bogged down in whatever M was giving him, or Q.
Yeah, it was the most extreme aspects of action films.
Yeah, it was lots of tech, and it was really tech heavy.
Although the GoldenEye wasn't that tech heavy. I think they changed that as they were going through the Brosnans.
Yeah, but then
GoldenEye feels like Brosnan's Casino Royale to Craig.
Yeah, although Casino Royale is really interesting because Casino Royale is actually the first Bond book.
Yeah.
And we didn't get a Casino Royale film until really late because Woody Allen...
Scandal noted.
Scandal noted, made Jimmy Bond.
Yeah.
Which was a comic adaptation of Casino Royale. And so when they were doing the serious Bond films, it was too soon after that for them to really play with that one. And so when they got to Daniel Craig and they were very quickly running out of material, they went, why not just redo Casino Royale?
Yeah.
Like, we're doing a full reboot of this series. Why not start it right at the start? We'll have Le Chiffre, who is a great Bond villain. That scene where Daniel Craig is tied to a chair with the bottom cut out and they're swinging the rope, straight from the book. Really brutal torture scene in the book. Like, he really tears him up. He has a period of convalescence, just like he does in the film. Like, they did a really gritty, nailed-on adaptation of early Bond stuff. They even gave him a Walter PPK.
I mean, they had to, don't they? That's always been the gun, hasn't it?
No, he had a different gun. Because
I thought it was always the Walter PPK.
No, so I might be getting this wrong, but he had a revolver originally. Bond had this revolver, and the revolver, there's a story where Bond dies, and the revolver jams, right? And that leads to his death. And then Ian Fleming says, well, actually, I want to reboot this and start writing more Bond books. And he brought a gun specialist in to say, what would Bond be using? So I think originally he had a Walter PPK and then he went over to a Beretta, or he had a Beretta and went to a Walter PPK.
Yeah, this one, which is definitely not a PPK.
That's a Beretta.
But the body looks very similar to a PPK.
That's a Beretta. That's an Italian gun. So yeah, he originally had a Walter PPK and then he went over to a Beretta because they were like, a spy wouldn't be using a big, heavy 6-shooter.
Yeah, you'd be carrying the smallest gun that you can conceal in the most efficient way.
And then obviously in the films, the Beretta was always what he was using.
Yeah.
But originally he had a big clunky 6-shooter, which is fucking great. Like a cowboy.
Stick 'em up, cowboy.
Yeah. Like imagine a spy pulling out a cowboy gun.
Stick 'em up, cowboy. That's me.
Oh no, we're not treading into that murky water.
We have to change the gun. Sean Connery cannot say 6-shooter too many times in one film, or we'll get spit everywhere.
Do you know that?
Shikshura.
You know that Ian Fleming did do stuff with the Secret Service, though?
I've heard a lot of stuff. It's him and Roald Dahl are two people I keep hearing like this, like, oh, they actually did stuff with the Secret Service, and it's always like, I have no idea what's true anymore.
Roald Dahl wrote a series of short stories called As You Like It.
He was also a honeypot for women in like who were married to men of power or something.
Yes, because he was a very good-looking chap. But he's one of the unconfirmed flying aces.
So is it confirmed or?
Well, so he was in the Battle of Britain. To be a flying ace, you had to take out 6 planes. You had to take out 6 Germans in your career. There is one dogfight where he has 4 unconfirmed kills. So everyone around him is like, yeah, Roald took out 4 Messerschmitts that day. But for it to be a confirmed kill, I think X number of pilots all need to have seen it.
Right.
And it was a shit show of a dogfight.
Because naturally, otherwise, someone would be like, yeah, I killed like 100.
Yeah, but no, Roald Dahl is one of the unconfirmed flying aces. Roald Dahl was a phenomenal pilot. Like, he was a really great pilot, and he wrote a book about his time in the RAF as a Battle of Britain pilot, which is fucking fantastic. It's so good. I've got a paperback of it floating around here somewhere, as you'd imagine.
Yeah.
In the book cave. Yeah, no, Roald Dahl was an absolute dude, mate. Like,
he may have been able to pilot a plane in the war, but that doesn't mean he could pilot a TARDIS. And
bringing it back around.
I mean, I think we basically covered it. Great comic, I thought, and there'll be more Doctor Who stuff, so maybe we'll dip in again. Definitely next Bond film that comes out, we'll do a Bond comic for sure.
Are there any?
Oh, I don't even know for sure, but I bet good money that there is.
Well, I was a huge fan of the Bond series as a kid. Like, as a high school kid, I read all of them.
I just watched most of the films.
So I've not seen all of the films, I don't think, but it's purely because I was such a huge fan of the books, and my dad and one of his friends sat me down and were like, "You love the Bond books, let's watch a Bond film." And I watched one, and I was like, "Yeah, it's not as good as the books." Although there's this really interesting thing that's happening with the books at the moment, because obviously
we have different different barometers for the word interesting.
No, I think you'll find this interesting, and I think it's really relevant to what we do here. So they're reissuing, obviously, they're always reissuing the books, but there's been a wider conversation happening in some of the recent reissues where they've talked about taking some of the racist language out. So, Ian Fleming very famously lived in Jamaica.
Live and let die.
And there's this whole thing where there's a lot of uses of not only the N-word that we would use now, but also some of the N-words that were quite popular in the 1960s.
Right.
And there's this kind of plot point in the book whereby there's a mass Chinese immigration into Jamaica. And obviously there's some, a lot of mixed race people coming out of that. And he coins a new slur for people of mixed black and Chinese heritage, which I will not say on air because it's pretty gross.
But Bond was like, I need to dedicate mental effort on this spy gig to creating a slur.
Yeah, literally. And so they're now talking about, well, do we take some of that out? And I kind of think that should we change older fiction to make it more palatable to a modern audience, or do we leave it intact out of the interest of preserving this stuff?
My general stance with stuff like this, I think most reasonable people are similar. I think the stuff should be left intact, but with a warning at the start. I
agree with you.
And I think Warner Brothers have done that with a lot of old Looney Tunes stuff.
And Disney have done it with all of their old films.
But specifically what they say at the beginning is they say, there's some stuff here that's, obviously viewed very differently nowadays. We've left it in with this warning because to take it out would be to act like it never happened.
Yeah,
which is the
totally.
worst thing you could do.
But I think this fits into a wider conversation that we've been having a lot when we've read older stuff, like The Boys, for instance.
Yeah. I think also the capitalist in me, I think I kind of playing both sides here. You could also release a censored version and say, hey, the original version with the warning is still available if you really want that, but also here's a censored version if you'd prefer that.
I think it's really different if you've got a living creator. So if you have a living creator who looks at a piece of work that they made in a different historical context, and they say, I just fully do not agree with what I did 50 years ago, so I'm going to myself re-edit this text with an editor, and we're going to put out a new version, and I'm going to say, look, I acknowledge that this old version exists, but this is how I would like my work to be perceived now, because there are different cultural standards, and I believe that what I did back then was wrong, right? I think that's one thing. But when you've got a long dead creator, I don't think it's right for us to go back and retroactively, posthumously change their work, because it's theirs and it exists in the medium they put it out in. But also, then you've got people who are like, well, I want to read a Bond story, but I'm black, and this is fucking offensive. And so I'm looking at it from both sides, and I do kind of fall down on one side of the argument, but I can see the other side as well.
Just do what I do. Just play both sides, and then you'll always come out on top.
No, you never come out on top. That's the point.
But you also tell everyone that you're playing both sides. Have you seen that Always Sunny?
Yeah, of course.
Yes. It's my favorite. Whenever anything comes up, I always do like the hand gesture, like, I'm playing both sides. You're not meant to tell people you're playing both sides.
For people listening in black and white, Ryan is gesturing with his fingertips forwards.
Because you're getting across a point. But also the funniest part is then when one of the other characters walks in, you go, Mac, what are you doing? He goes, oh, I'm playing both sides. Like, it's just this instinctive explanation.
Funny story by the way. This is one of my dad's. When he was a kid, he was watching snooker with his dad on their black and white telly. And
which balls are which?
Well, this is the thing. The commentator said, so he's going for the green. For anyone watching in black and white, the green's the one next to the pink.
That's a good joke.
Apparently it happened. Apparently that actually happened. And I think that's fantastic.
I was talking to someone the other day, and they were talking about like how there's always like jokes. Like they had a misconception that all jokes had to have like a victim, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And just in a very contextual way that someone is the butt of the joke. And I heard a joke, and I knew that wasn't the case, but I couldn't think of any examples at the time. And then I was literally listening to a podcast, and someone talked about a joke from Police Squad TV show, which was Naked Gun before it was Naked Gun. And one of the jokes in there is Leslie Nielsen walks into a crime scene, and there's a guy at the crime scene, and he goes, "Who are you? And how did you get in there?" And the guy goes, "I'm a locksmith." And I'm a locksmith. And I was like, I needed this example when I was having the conversation, because that's a perfect example of a victimless joke, which is still quite funny.
Yeah, it is really funny.
One last point on the whole Bond thing,
which I was
going to mention. In terms of old racist Bond moments, I don't think, in terms of the films especially, none peak as high as Sean Connery, his Bond, going undercover as an Asian man.
Oh, yeah. Fuck.
But it is the worst part, because people look at that and go, well, that's bad, because he literally gets prosthetic eyelids put over his own and a wig, and I think they like add like makeup for his skin color and everything. So he goes through all this, and then the reveal is he comes out and it's meant to be like, oh my god, you look exactly like them. And now, obviously nowadays, we're like, he looks like Sean Connery with stuff on his face. Like, that's it.
Sean Connery in Asia face.
And the worst part of it all, in my opinion, is then as soon as he meets the person who he's putting on all this makeup for to blend in so he's not recognized, they immediately go, James Bond. And it's like, who wrote this? Like,
you did something super racist and there wasn't even a point to it.
Like, if he'd gotten away with it, that at least in the story of the world, it'd be like, I don't agree with this, but it gets results. It didn't even get results. It was the most pointless, like, should we be racist for no reason? But put a lot of effort into it. So if you can find that film, give it a watch. It's hilarious.
That's awful.
But I think...
Have I ever told you about the most egregious blackface I've ever seen?
I've not heard this story.
Oh my God. So it's from, I think it's either Norwegian or Finnish, Stars in Their Eyes.
Oh my God.
And this woman,
Don't they have like celebrations and like festivities that use blackface or something?
Yeah, there's a lot of that in European countries. We have one as well. Some of the Morris dancers will black up, but like
if you need more of a reason to be up a Morris dancer.
Well, the people who do it are really ardent in doing so, because they say it's like about coal mining.
The worst hill to die on is anything related to Morris dancing.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, no, they say it's about coal mining, and the black is meant to represent coal. It's not a racial thing. Still weird. No, so this woman comes out on, you remember Stars in Your Eyes, right?
Yeah. Tonight, Matthew, I will be...
For anyone who doesn't know what Stars in Your Eyes is, they would dress you up as a pop star, and you would either sing or lip sync to their song.
It was basically televised karaoke? Because they would sing. I
No,
think.
they'd lip sync.
Oh, well, that's even worse.
So you'd come out dressed up as an artist and you'd lip sync. But this one's offensive on every level because they dress her up as Stevie Wonder.
Jesus Christ.
And she's not blind, but somebody leads her to the keyboard as if she is blind. And she's in full blackface. And then she sits down at this keyboard. And like that very, very recognizable specific facial...
The
head swing that Stevie Wonder does when he's singing, which is like super iconic, just part of his aesthetic and the way he performs. She's doing that whole fucking thing, man. They lead her out as if she can't see, and then she sits down at a piano and spends 5 minutes pretending to be Stevie Wonder, and it is the worst thing I've ever seen. Honestly, and it's on fucking YouTube, man. You can find that shit. It is awful.
I love the thinking of someone be like, oh, so you want to lip sync to Stevie Wonder then? Like, yeah. It's like, all right, cool. And they're like, all right, so when am I blacking up? It's like, oh, are we going that level? Okay, fine. It's like, who's going to leave me out? It's like, oh, right.
Every single thing just makes it worse,
right?
We're
doing this and this. I was going to say, I saw A Star Is Your Eyes with someone being Freddie Mercury.
Right.
And I'm not going to make the explicit joke, but the premise that came to mind was there's a lot of things I bet that person did not do to get into the character of playing Freddie Mercury. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't have to, just because it's part of the real life person, you don't have to do as well to bloody karaoke or lip sync.
Yeah, and I'm like, do you know what? If you're a white person and you want to lip sync to Stevie Wonder, it's a questionable life choice, but go for it. But don't black up. You just don't need to black up. But realistically, I saw this thing by an Irish bloke said, and he said that one of his Irish uncles had said it, which is, if you're going to get arrested for nicking a horse, you might as well fuck it as well. And that's the thing, innit? She fucking, I mean, I don't agree with it. I think it's a bit gross, but she fucking went there.
I mean, it'd be worse if she half-hearted it after all that.
Yeah, she just kind of bopped out. Do you know what I mean?
Didn't even put the effort in. It's like, you've already... If this was 20 years later, you'd be out of the job. But
yeah, totally.
I think the expression you were looking for was in for a penny, in for a pound.
Yeah, but if you're going to get done for nicking a horse, you might as well fuck it is much funnier.
I mean, bestiality is another thing.
Right, well, you're going to have fun writing the description for this episode.
I was thinking that, and I think I'm just going to do Doctor Who and all that, and then from a time code, it's going to be, and James Bond, because he's British as well.
Well done.
That's going to be it, isn't it?
And then the blackface is just a huge surprise for everyone.
If you've stuck to the end of the episode, you get this little surprise.
So thank you for listening.
We really appreciate it.
I hope you've had a wonderful time. We make shorts. They appear on YouTube and TikTok, just under the same name as the podcast. If you want to leave us a review, you can do that. If you want to send us an email.
And what kind of review do we want?
5-star, always.
Baby. Yes.
5-star, baby. If you can leave us a 5-star review and then the text is just baby, all caps, 3 exclamation marks, you'd make my day.
Absolutely.
So thanks for listening. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.